The fire escape logs that freed me. 1. Test is a kind word for what you mean to do. The sound that woke me wasn't an alarm. It was the building clearing its throat. A relay somewhere below us clicked twice, polite like a librarian asking for quiet. I stared into the dark until the door frame separated from the wall, a thin gray slit. Beside me, Mara exhaled in that careful way people perform when they want to be observed sleeping. I've lived a decade by panels and pipes. A fire system speaks if you listen. Valves cough, pumps chew, flow switches stutter like strobe lights you can't see. I checked my phone out of habit, 2:20 a.m., and slid it face down so the notification glow wouldn't turn meaning into panic. I told myself it was maintenance. Then my scalp tingled with the detail every engineer hates. Maintenance comes with paperwork. I swung my feet to the floor. The apartment held the ordinary night, the quiet of old oak, refrigerator clicks, the hum a building wears like a cardigan. From the hall, a trio of LEDs threw a faint wreath onto the jam. Power, network, test. Test? In the overnight? Unannounced? I felt my mood flatten, that trapezoid of resignation you get when you recognize a familiar trick wearing a new jacket. Behind me, sheets moved. You okay? Mara's voice hoarse with sleep. She had started asking a lot lately. You okay? You sleeping? You eating? Carrying phrases that can, under pressure, carve someone into a case. I said, panels and test, shouldn't be. She made a soothing noise. Maybe they're fixing it, she said. You've been keyed up. Try to rest. It wasn't what she said, it was where the words landed. On me, not on the panel. On my temperature, not the room's. I took my keys from the glass dish by the door and stepped into the corridor, barefoot. The hallway light was what I call morning yellow, humane enough not to scold your eyes. At the end of the hall, the fire panel squatted like a red bookcase with a secret. The LCD was grainy and perfect. 2:19:07 enter test mode. Below it, Zone 7 supervisory. A watchful message that isn't an alarm or an all clear. Supervisory means someone touched something they shouldn't, or something that shouldn't be touched got the idea to move. I didn't reset. God help you if you've reset evidence with your fingers. I stood and let the system speak. In the riser closet down the way, a valve clanged a fraction of an inch and then thought better. Water is heavy, and buildings remember the hand that tips them. A door opened. Mrs. Park, 3 floors up, leaned over the banister with a mug the size of a planetoid. You hear it too? She whispered, delighted to be right. 2 clicks, then a little ahem. That's exactly what it sounded like. A little ahem. I smiled because anyone else would have heard nothing. I said, go to sleep. She didn't. When I returned to the apartment, the bed was made around an absence. Mara stood by the window in one of my old college shirts, the hem grayed with the years. She set her phone face down so smoothly I wouldn't have noticed if I weren't watching for it. I couldn't sleep, she said. You looked restless. I said, just listening. Don't chase ghosts, she said, sliding into bed. I know how I get. I go to the panel. I go to the logs. I put time in a row and discover which story survives being read that way. At 2:27:14, the panel chirped again. A flow monitor flagged for a breath and expired. Not alarm, not nothing. Something rehearsing the language of fire. Beside me, Mara's breath evened out, or pretended to. 2. Her kindness had a filing system. We had been fighting politely for 4 months. I say we. What I mean is I had been sad and Mara had been productive about it. She wrote emails to my sister about support, recommended a therapist with a tone I reserved for plumbers and gods, slipped questionnaires under my coffee like coasters. Depression is a liar. Check in with a loved one today. Know the signs. A month ago, she asked me to add her as an emergency contact on a few accounts. Practicality, she said, and smiled the smile good wives learn from toothpaste commercials in courtrooms. Maybe I was depressed. Engineers trend depressive. Entropy is our love language. Work had been patchy, too much design review, too little pipe to hold. But sadness doesn't move panels into test at 2:20 a.m. That takes a finger. At 2:31 a.m., something small blooms somewhere down the hall. The sound of a lighter is too quick to be a sound, more of a flicker in the air. Then the panel did a little inhale and the event line moved and then didn't. Not alarm, not nothing. Something rehearsing the language of fire. Beside me, Mara's breath evened out, or pretended to. "Tomorrow," she said into the dark, "let's call Dr. Hansen. Just talk to someone. For me." I pictured Dr. Hansen's office. Ficus, tissues, a print of a beach pretending it was a painting. I pictured myself answering the question, "What brings you here?" with, "A woman I love is making a record of me for someone else to read later." At 2:42, the panel left test. The relays unclicked. The world in our building returned to ordinary risk. I lay there and listened to the silence until it had edges. Mara reached for my hand and arranged our fingers like cables stowed for a safety audit. In the morning, she would say, "See, you slept." And in the morning, I would find the little document she had made of the night. A text to my sister at 2:45. "He's up again. I'm worried." The sentence wasn't evil. It was just useful.
3. Water remembers the hand that moved it. Good proof is boring. That's why it works. At 9, I walked down to the superintendent's office with a half-dozen glazed donuts and the smile men use when they're about to ask for something that shouldn't be given. Arthur loves donuts. He loves them with a purity unbecoming of a human and entirely appropriate for a saint. "Logs," he said, mouth shining, "you engineers and your bedtime stories." He refused me properly in 4 different ways. "I only need last night," I said, "from 2 to 3. Panel events, pump start-stop, any water flow or tamper on the 7th zone. I won't touch the panel, you export it." Arthur wiped sugar from his lower lip with a work order. "You're not the authority," he said. "Management needs request." Then he looked at the donuts and adjusted his policy. I could show, not print. That was enough. He opened the panel's little door with a key that should have been harder to copy. The LCD, to its credit, remembered perfectly. It always does. 02-1907, enter test mode, no user ID. 02-27-14, water flow impulse, zone 7, 3 seconds. 02-31-22, elevator relay hold, 10 seconds. 02-42-03, exit test mode. Someone had placed the brains of our building into a pocket and decided it needed a rehearsal. "Elevator relay?" I asked. Arthur squinted. "Camera power tied somewhere stupid long time ago. In test, panel holds some relays differently. Old building, many surprises." He pressed a finger to the glass like a child on an aquarium. "No alarm. Lucky." Lucky is one word. Another is prepared. I signed my name in the visitor log for the office next door and asked to see yesterday's elevators. The assistant, a woman with tired pearls and a clipboard theology, made a phone call and shook her head. "Privacy," she said, twice, as if the repetition was more law than an explanation. "I just need stills would help," I said. "From around 2:30. You can blur anything you like. I need to know if the relay held the camera the way the panel says." She liked that I asked for less. People always like you better when you want small things they can give. "I'll ask," she said, not unkindly, and in that sentence lived a day. At home, Mara folded laundry into shapes that meant she had been doing it for an hour before I came back. She narrated gently in the language of competence. "I sorted your blue shirts by sleeve. The charcoal ones bled. I replaced the wok. The old one had a wobble. I watched her carry objects around the apartment as if building a case. How'd you sleep?" she asked. "Well enough. Panel was in test." She frowned, a symmetrical piece of righteousness. "You can't keep cataloging the world like this. You'll miss your life." "I catalog my life so I don't miss it." "Say you'll call Hansen. Say you'll ask the front desk who put the panel into test." She looked at the window. "You hear yourself." "Yes," I said. Now I want to hear them. 4. 0219 to 0227 to 0231. Timeline is a loving weapon. If you lay it down without malice, it cuts only what deserves to be severed. I opened my notebook and wrote the night as if it mattered where each beat lived. 021907, panel. Enter test mode, no user ID. 022714, water flow impulse, zone 7, 3 seconds. 023122, elevator relay hold, 10 seconds. 024203, exit test mode. Below that, I drew a building in boxes, our stack, the valve closet, the 7th zone piping, the cheap decision 10 years ago to tie a camera relay to a panel contact that had no business babysitting it. Then I added a line for what wasn't in the panel, but was in the real world, because systems are human, and humans refuse to be everything one place. 0231XX, I believe, lighter bloom in the corridor. 0232- footsteps down the hall if Mrs. Park heard them. Earlier, my wife suggested Dr. Hansen again. Pattern. An engineer is a dangerous kind of poet. We believe metaphors can hold weight. Water flow impulse is a stutter in a throat. A relay hold is a held breath. Test mode is a posed smile. I made tea because coffee would make me honest too quickly. Mara moved around me with the arm's-length choreography of a couple who forgot where they hung the picture that told them who they were. "You have a list," she said. She didn't mean the notebook. She meant the hue that comes over me when things make a shape. What will it prove? That someone rehearsed the building. For what? Fire? She laughed lightly, which is how people tell you they are afraid. We don't have fires, Nate. We have plumbers. I've seen rooms go black with smoke in 30 seconds, and I watch sprinklers turn them into rain inside. I've seen people die because a valve was once left 1/4 closed. We have fires. We just don't invite them by name. At noon, the elevator office sent a link with a password that read like a hymn. 3 stills. 2 were nothing, an empty car with the distant glare of emergency night. The 3rd was a corridor angle. The camera sees more than you think when it sees less. The corner of a hand, the flare of something small and hungry, a shoulder turning out of frame. Resolution is a kind of mercy. You can't see a face. You can see intent. Mara sat at the table and scrolled through recipes in the most nonchalant way anyone has ever scrolled recipes. She touched the screen with the performative softness people use when they want to be a character in their own life. "You hate cumin," she said, and smiled like we were cute. "Who was up at 2:30? I asked. "Who put the panel into test?" "We don't know. We can't know. That's why you should talk to someone about how you let the unknown bully you." She wasn't wrong. The unknown does bully me. That's why I make it known.
5. Mrs. Park hears everything. Mrs. Park is retired the way an athlete retires a jersey, with ceremony, with placement, with the understanding that the person still practices in their mind. She had once run a small Korean restaurant. Now she runs every hallway she touches. "It isn't gossip if it saves a life," she told me once, and I believed her. When I knocked, she opened with the speed of someone who had been standing behind the door. The apartment smelled like broth and stubbornness. TV with the sound low, slippers like punctuation. "You heard 2 clicks," I said, and held up a bag of mandarins like an offering to a temple. "Nate," she said, delighted and grave. A panel cleared its throat, then feet. She moved to the window and indexed her memory against the glass. "Heels, then flats," she said, or a woman changing her mind about how to be tall. Short, quick steps away. Then the elevator sighed. "You engineers always think in numbers. I think in shoes." "It helps," I said. "What time?" She didn't hesitate. 2:31 and some, she said. My show had just cut to a commercial, the insurance ad with the dog.
That song is 30 seconds. The elevator voice came after the song, going down. She imitated the machine with a sweetness that made me want to cry. You engineers always want to hold the clock by the neck. I braid the time into a story. Did you see who? I asked. Just a shoulder. Someone a little too sure of how gentle they looked. She squinted at me. Why do you want to know, and why do I already know? I gave her something, not everything. Because the panel was in test when it shouldn't have been. Because somebody told the building a lie about whether we were in danger. She poured tea into 2 cups that did not match. Men like you marry women who can administrate events. Then you find yourself living inside the minutes of a meeting you didn't attend. She set a cup before me. I will testify I heard what I heard. I will also make soup. Both are how I love my building. On my way out, she called after me. Nate, if you go to war, go in daylight. I texted the inspector I trusted most, a man named Doyle who believes in the power of boredom, and asked him to coffee. He replied with a thumbs up and a time that felt like a subpoena. When I came home, Mara had laid out 3 shirts and a gilt. Wear the blue, she said, as if we were going to church. And please don't start a fight with City. I'm going to ask for the logs, I said. You already have your answer, she said, gesturing vaguely at my notebook. What do you need from strangers? Authority. That word tastes like metal. And someone who doesn't love me enough to lie. She swallowed that and then smiled beautifully. Dr. Hansen at 3, she said. Just a consult. Maybe, which is a word that doesn't belong in a marriage unless you've already started packing it. 6. Evidence walks, then it rides the elevator. Inspector Doyle likes cheap coffee and expensive silence. He let me lay the timeline out and didn't correct my verbs. He wrote 0219 on a napkin, like a graffitist with grief. He said, test mode without a work order is an offense. Not a felony, but not nothing. We're not talking criminal until we're talking combustion, I said. He lifted a shoulder. We're talking intention. Some people like to measure the pool before they drown someone. I slid the elevator stills across the table. He didn't look at the knot face. He looked at the edge where the light swelled and then receded. Small flame, hand close, no aerosol patterns. Probably a cheap lighter or a hobby torch. He said it with the blandness of a man careful not to teach arson. A test, he added, because the system was told to ignore. Zone 7, riser branch near the laundry room. You think they cracked a drain to make the flow switch blip? He asked. I think they don't know enough to know how dumb that would be, but they know enough to want the panel quiet. He nodded, pleased I had insulted someone who deserved it. I'll request the full export, chain of custody. You'll sign and swear. Swear, I said, and felt faith re-enter my body. Back home, the day had arranged itself into the kind of afternoon when the world smelled like lentils. Mara had made a soup she knows I love. She ladled it with tenderness that might have been a weapon. You look tired. Dr. Hansen will help. I met with Doyle. He'll get the logs. Why? She asked. What do any of these numbers do for you? They tell me whether I'm a story you can rewrite. She put the ladle down where it could clang. That's not fair. No, it's precise. Her eyes filmed glossy, which is one of humanity's most dangerous states. You want me to be the villain, she said. I want the data to make the decision for me. I'm tired of choosing who you are. I'll choose the panel. She shook her head with theatrical hurt that made me ashamed. It is a difficult thing to be loved by someone who is preparing a eulogy for the parts of you they find untidy. I called the insurance yesterday, she said suddenly, as if confessing would inoculate the sin. Pre-report, in case the building's wiring is faulty. They said an adjuster can... When? I asked. She shifted. Afternoon, she said. Which afternoon? She looked at her soup. Before the night you didn't sleep. Before the smoke, I said, quietly. She lifted her chin. We needed help. You won't get help. There are sentences that drain water from steel. I stood up and my chair made the noise furniture makes when it realizes it's going to be remembered. I have to pick up something for Mrs. Park. I lied, and left because sometimes the most mature thing you can do is stop speaking to the person who wants you weak. In the elevator, I watched the camera watch me. I thought about how often we beg the wrong audience to believe us. I thought about how boring evidence is and how holy. When the doors opened, the hallway bent toward the panel like a hymn. The display was steady noon. Nothing to see, it said. Sleep, it said. Trust. But the logs beneath it were a story the building would tell me as soon as Doyle put a stapler through them and slid them across a table. And if that story matched the stills and the neighbor and the call before the smoke, then the next chapter would not be catharsis. It would be paperwork with teeth.
7. The Pump Room Confession. Doyle met me in the service corridor with the posture of a man who has worn out 200 pairs of boots and one marriage doing exactly this. He unlocked the pump room and let the heavy door sigh on welcome. Pump rooms are chapels, concrete, cold, and honest. Everything echoes, and nothing lies for long. We stood for a minute and didn't speak, which is an engineer's handshake. The jockey pump sat like a polite terrier, the main pump like a patient ox. The air held a faint iron breath of water that has been moving in the dark. Doyle crouched and pointed where a lockout tag should have been clipped. "No tag," he said. "No red shroud." He touched the chain on the quarter-turn isolation valve. It jingled, too loose for compliance, too neat for accident. "I'm going to say something, and you're going to tell me if I'm being dramatic," I said. "Somebody rehearsed this room the way an actor rehearses the only line they know they can't forget." Doyle squinted at the jockey pump controller. A thin crescent of dust was rubbed clear on the faceplate around the manual test button. There was no poetry in dust. There is only attendance. He touched the chain on the quarter-turn isolation valve. It jingled, too loose for compliance, too neat for accident. "I'm going to say something and you're going to tell me if I'm being dramatic," I said. "Somebody rehearsed this room the way an actor rehearses the only line they know they can't forget." Doyle squinted at the jockey pump controller. A thin crescent of dust was rubbed clear on the faceplate around the manual test button. There is no poetry in dust. There is only attendance. Somebody put hands on things. They didn't know enough to be good at it. "Panel says flow spiked at 227, I said, showing him the print of the event list from Arter's office, which he shouldn't have let me have and I shouldn't have taken. Doyle checked the discharge gauge and wrote the morning's readings in a notebook he carried that had been cheap long enough to become holy. "I'll pull pump start-stop events from the controller. If they tickled this, my machine will remember it, whether they meant to or not." A maintenance man wandered in with a mop and the defensiveness of a human interrupting a conversation between law and water. Doyle showed his badge without heat. The man nodded and left backwards like a servant quitting a throne room. "Chain of custody," Doyle said softly when we were alone again. "I don't need this to be criminal to make it matter. I need it to be procedural." I knew what he meant. Fire code isn't a sermon, it's a ledger. You didn't do a thing, not you sinned. You failed a step, and the step is documented because buildings are collections of agreed-upon lies. The lie that the floor will stay, that the door will open, that the water will be where water should be. I ran my fingers over the paint on the riser and felt the slight grit of a recent brush-up. Steel holds memory like skin. "I'll ask Arter for the valve closet access log," I said. "You'll do no such thing," Doyle said, smiling without showing me his teeth. "I'll ask Arter for the valve closet access log. You ask your wife whether she called the insurance before or after she made soup." "That ship sailed," I said. "Ships can call back," Doyle said. "I've seen it." On our way out, he touched the green pilot light on the controller, as if to bless it. "I don't care if people are messy. I care if they touch the water."
When I came upstairs, I found Mara at the table with 3 bank envelopes opened neatly with the skill of a person who knows letters can bleed. She looked up like a student caught drawing hearts and daggers. "The adjuster called," she said. "He can come today." "What time?" I asked. 3, she said. "I thought it would feel good to be proactive." Proactive is when you check your smoke detectors. Proactive is not when you schedule your apology before the wrong has happened. Her mouth did a thing mouths do when they are tired of being understood. "You're turning this into a test," she said. "It went into test at 219, I said. We left it there because some words are 220 volts and need covers. 8. The adjuster in khaki. Adjusters come in 2 kinds, one who wants to be your priest and one who wants to be your math teacher. Mr. Clement was a math teacher in a khaki jacket that had never known weather. He shook my hand the way professors shake your hand when they've already assigned you a grade. "Walk me through the incident," he said, in the lobby, taking out a legal pad like a token. The pad was pre-creased at the thirds. The lines waited for us like lanes. "There was no incident," I said, and watched his eyes do the administrative equivalent of a blink. "There was practice." We took him to the panel. Arter hovered, simultaneously territorial and thrilled to be in a scene. Doyle, who had promised to be around, had chosen to be precisely here. Mr. Clement wrote Panel Test 219 on his pad and underlined it twice as if underline were a ritual. "Citizen complaint?" he asked. "Engineer complaint," I said. "Better," Doyle muttered. We showed him the event log, my copy tucked away to keep the chain from tangling. Arter exported the official file, plugging a thumb drive into the panel like you plug a thermometer into a roast. Mr. Clement nodded when the O227 water flow impulse came up, then squinted as if his face had been coded to perform skepticism when the shape of a story didn't match the shape of a claim. "And this is related to your prior distress?" he said carefully, looking not at me but the air around my face. "I sleep poorly, and I still know the difference between a system doing what it should and a hand telling it to do something it shouldn't." Mara put a palm between us, physically, decisively, like she was separating children. "He's been under strain," she said to Mr. Clement. "Our doctor—" "Your call came before any alarm," I said to her, quietly, because I wanted Mr. Clement to hear the content and not the performance. "I smelled burning," she said. "At 2 in the afternoon, the day prior to the night in question," Doyle said pleasantly. "We discussed the wiring with management. They told me to be vigilant. I was being vigilant." Mr. Clement made a noise people make when they want to acknowledge everything and commit to nothing. "Let's look at the corridor camera," he said. We took him to the elevator office. The woman with the pearls administered privacy again, but now Doyle's badge made the hymn shorter. 3 stills, heels, then flats, the corner of a hand, a small round light like a star too close to live. Mr. Clement leaned in without leaning in. "Who is this?" he asked, and meant the pronoun the way bureaucrats mean pronouns. Not who, but what assignment of liability will the sentence tolerate? "No faces," Doyle said, "only time." "Time is sufficient," Mr. Clement said, a sentence that almost rehabilitated him entirely. Back in the apartment, he asked for the kitchen. Adjusters love kitchens. They're the stage where domestic tragedy pretends it was about soup all along. He wrote insurance pre-call on his pad. He wrote doctor's name and left a blank. Mara took the pen and wrote Hansen in her neat municipal hand. "I'll need to speak with your physician," Mr. Clement said. The way he said it made it sound like he always got to speak with physicians, and they always enjoyed speaking with him. "Please do," I said. "Ask him if I said the words, 'I want to die this year.' Ask him if I made any plan. Ask him if I know the difference between tired and finished." Mara stiffened. "This is cruel." "This is precise," I said, again. Mr. Clement left with a pad full of boxes and a politeness that meant we might not meet again if his inbox told him he didn't have to. Doyle lingered. "I'm going to ask management for the work order history," he said. "I want to see if anyone scheduled test mode. If they didn't, that's a line. Lines add up." "Do lines ever love you back?" Mara asked him, with sudden charm that made me dizzy. "They keep me from crying in public," Doyle said. "That's love enough."
9. The receipt with the flame in it. There's a bodega 3 blocks from us that keeps its cameras pointed at the lottery tickets like the tickets might run away. The owner is a man who believes in eye contact as currency. I bought a coffee and told him I had a personal war with a lighter and needed a still. "Resell many lighters," he said, amused. "Yesterday, between 6 and 7, I said, pretty woman, soft hair, walked out scanning the sky like she had 2 different weather reports. Paid cash. The lighter had a torch head, blue flame, not orange." If you ask a man to remember a woman, his memory will shape itself in manners I cannot endorse. He brightened. "Her," he said, and pulled up a thumb sweep of video. "No face, never a face, just hands, posture, the elastic of the gaze." She bought tissues and a torch. The camera caught the head of the lighter for a frame and the slip of a foldable shopping bag. "Print?" he asked. "Just a still," I said. "I don't need to keep it. I need to show it quickly to someone who speaks napkin." He printed 1 copy, thermal paper, black on gray, and slid it across the counter like a boy sliding a note he hopes is not a love letter. "No charge," he said. "You look like a person who needs the universe to do one small thing for you today for free." "Do you know her name?" I asked, because sometimes the most ludicrous question dislodges the only useful answer. "Names are for customers. Stories are for neighbors." He tipped his chin at the door. "We're neighbors." At home, Mara was composing a list. The list was for no one, and the list was for God. Trash day. Call mom. Breathe. The last one broke me a little, the way a person reminds themselves to breathe when they are already breathing. "Did you buy a lighter?" I asked softly. She set the pen down like she was laying a sword on an altar. "Yes," she said, "because the stove starter is unreliable. Our stove has a pilot, and the lighter you bought is for hobbies that don't include soup." "What is the point of this if you've already made me my sentence?" she asked. "The point is that I'm trying to give you the gentlest possible verb in a paragraph that ends with someone going to court." She closed her eyes and, "I wanted the house to notice you," she said. And there it was, the truth in a shape only a person in love with their own evidence could find beautiful. "You move through rooms like rooms are lucky to have you. I wanted the rooms to speak." "You scheduled them," I said. "That's not speech, that's theater." "I am tired of being the audience," she said. "I am tired of being the lighting rig," I said. We stood there with our nouns and didn't know how to marry them. 10. The practice fire. Doyle booked the test because he believes in demonstrations. He brought a small device that produces just enough aerosolized obscurity to wake a detector without waking the entire city. We stood by the corridor sensor with the superintendent, a witness, and a camera pointed at nothing but a clock. The building breathed in. "Now," Doyle said, and the little machine whispered. The detector blinked its half-blind eye, puzzled, then told the panel it had an opinion. The panel, not in test, did what panels do. It told everybody to be louder than anyone wanted to be. Alarms are not screams, they are public announcements of a science fact. People poured into the hall and formed committees. Someone put a hand on someone else's shoulder. Someone remembered a cat.
Someone remembered that the only thing you really own in a fire is your shoes. The elevator locked itself the way good machines refuse to help disaster. Doyle looked like a priest hearing a prayer said correctly. We silenced the alarm for 30 seconds, reset after 60, and watched the panel log get lines that matched the world. In test, Doyle said. Last night, this does not happen. In test, the detector speaks, the panel nods, and then nobody else is invited to the conversation. The panel holds the elevator relay differently. An old fault makes a camera go blind for 10 seconds. Someone walks by with a lighter and thinks they are unseen. Practice, I said. Practice, he said. We did, at no point, put flame to anything. The machine Doyle brought was about as erotic as a breath mint. This is important to say because the story of how you demonstrated the truth becomes the truth you demonstrated. Mara came to the door of the corridor for a fraction of a second and then thought better of being seen near proof. It hurt in a place the body reserves for the moment you discover the picture frame is empty and has been empty for weeks while you were admiring the corner joinery. When the alarms were cleared and the building returned to its ordinary arrogance, Doyle wrote on his napkin again, which is how he makes scripture. We have test without work order, water flow impulse, elevator relay hold, a still of a hand and a flame, a lighter purchase, and an insurance pre-call. Plus Mrs. Park, I said. Plus Mrs. Park, he said solemnly. And my testimony that a competent person who wished to be an arsonist would never leave this much choreography. This is not competence. This is orchestration by someone who believes applause is proof. That sounds like prosecution, I said. That sounds like me doing my job, he said.
11. The email that walked through walls. Property management brought in a manager whose suit had a sense of humor it should have checked at reception. He presented the work order history with the flourish of a magician who knows the deck is stacked with blank cards. No entries for last night, he said, tapping the page. No scheduled test. Camera log for the key cabinet, Doyle said mildly. The manager shuffled. We don't have a camera there, he said, and then remembered he was speaking to a man who could write him a citation for that sentence. Sign-out sheet, Doyle said mildly. It arrived with the look of a document that was expecting company and got God. No signatures after 6, no assignment of a master key. Artur, standing to one side with the guilty innocence of a man whose entire job is duct tape and prayer, whispered, I think Wilmer has a copy of a copy. Bring me Wilmer, Doyle said, still kind. Wilmer presented as one continuous apology. I never, he began. We're not after your glory, Doyle said. We're after your chronology. Wilmer relaxed into the right kind of terror. I was off, he said, but I came in to fix a leak in 4B. The key, he looked at Artur, then at me, and then at a stain on the ceiling. I took the wrong ring, he murmured. The master. What time? Doyle asked. 2:15, Wilmer said. Did you put the panel in test? Doyle asked. Wilmer blinked. I don't touch the red box, he said earnestly, which contrived to be simultaneously plausible and preposterous, a magic trick performed by fear. I only changed a washer, I asked. Where? Zone 7 feed, he said, which sits a single hallway from the detector that saw a bloom and a silhouette. Wilmer's eyes begged me to understand that a washer is not a match. It's surprisingly easy for a person to be used as an alibi, Doyle said to no one and everyone. He's here. He touched a thing. He doesn't know what else the person who invited him in was doing. The manager cleared his throat. Why would anyone stage what is this? A rehearsal. I said, insurance money is faster than forgiveness. Some people prefer checks to applause. The manager made a note that read, person, which was both cowardly and right.
12. The hearing that refused applause. We sat at a table that had seen dozens of small failures and a few great ones. It had the burnish that comes from palms and pleas. The fire marshal chaired. Doyle testified in a voice that could have set bones. The manager constructed passive voice out of spineless nouns. Mara came with a cardigan that made her look trustworthy and a silence that made her look wrong. The marshal opened with the script of the civic. We are here to determine whether procedures were followed and whether corrective actions are indicated. He said corrective actions the way dentists say floss. Doyle began at 2:19 a.m. and walked to 2:42 a.m. like a man leading a blindfolded crowd through a live map. He put the panel export on a screen nobody wanted to watch and pointed at the line items as if they were stars he had named himself long ago. He never said guilt, he said sequence. Mrs. Park took the stand with the authority of a woman who has eaten life and chosen which spices to tell you about. 2 clicks and a little hum, she said, and there were snorts of laughter, because truth is funniest when bureaucracy has to acknowledge it's human. She described heels, then flats, the elevator voice. The marshal wrote heels/flats as if it were a term of art. Mr. Clement attended remotely on a screen like a porthole and said what adjusters say when they are trying not to be sued by either outcome. We are reviewing timelines, he said. The pre-call is noted. He did not mean the sentence to sting. It stung. I spoke last because I wanted the math to exist before the feelings. I said I was tired. I said depression is a machine with a failing bearing, and sometimes the noise it makes is the only thing keeping you from surrender. I said nothing in the logs resembles a man attempting to die. If I wanted to die, I said, choosing blunt because careful would lose us the air, I would have burnt the building down after I left a note, in which case you'd be interviewing my shoes. The marshal winced, then nodded, because the sentence earned its vulgarity. Mara's advocate, who had emerged from someone's wallet between chapters, asked if I had ever shouted, slammed, broken. I said I have slammed a wrench into a pump housing when my knuckles were young and my heart was stupid. He asked if I had ever said, I wish it would all end. I said, I have said I wish the meeting would end, and I wish the sound in my head would change, and I wish I wanted a different life. I have never wished for my absence. He asked if my profession grants me an intoxicating sense of control. I said, my profession makes me respect the number of ways the world can go wrong and still miss me with grace. The marshal excused us to a hallway where the paint had layers like geologic strata. When he called us back, he read from a page but looked at our faces, which is the decent way to do it. Findings, he said. Unscheduled test mode is a violation. Water flow impulse absent fire indicates manipulation. Evidence sufficient to refer for criminal inquiry regarding attempted insurance fraud and endangerment. He didn't look at Mara when he said endangerment. He looked at the table. Tables are great bearers of blame. He turned to me. You will consider speaking to that doctor regardless, he said, not unkindly. Even engineers sometimes benefit from an expert witness in their own head. Noted, I said. Mara didn't cry. She said very still, which is a form of panic that looks like poise. 13. What mercy looks like. I did not pack that night. There's an obscenity in packing after a hearing. It feels like you are trying to turn a civic decision into momentum. Instead, I made soup, not as evidence, not as performance, as an apology to my own mouth for the words I'd used. Mrs. Park slid a Tupperware under our door the way outlaws slide notes in movies. Inside, dumplings shaped like commas. She understands that the body wants punctuation to continue.
Mara sat on the couch with her knees pulled up, small and strategic. The cardigan had become a blanket, had become a costume, had become an exoskeleton. "I'm not a monster," she said without prelude. I said, "You picked the wrong instrument. You can't fix loneliness by making a building speak." She said, "I wanted the people in our lives to see how much I'm carrying, every vowel a wet stone." I said, "You wanted witnesses. You got one. He writes in napkins." She said, "Don't be mean." I said, "I'm not. He's the best man I know. He's who the city sends when it wants to not be cruel." She stared at the floor as if the wood would send up captions. "Do you remember the time you fixed that restaurant valve at midnight?" she asked. "The chef hugged you like you were a fireman." "I remember," I said. "The chef had a temper with his staff and used me for grace." She said, "I wanted grace, and I wanted to be right, and I wanted to not feel like the only person awake." I said, "I can give you one of those things. I can be awake. I can't give you right if you aren't right, and grace doesn't come as a debit card." We sat with the soup and the silence and the ghost of smoke that had never been. "Will you leave?" she asked finally. I said, "I will move out," which is not the same verb and was the kindest one I owned. She began, "People will think." I said, "They will. Let them. I am tired of narrating." She nodded and stood and put her bowl in the sink like obedience. "I'll send your things," she said, and the sentence, meant practical, felt like a cut. I said, "Keep the wok, because some mercy is petty and useful." She almost smiled, which is how you learn a heart is not a switch, but a dimmer. 14. Paperwork with teeth. When bureaucracies love you, they do it in letters. The first was from the property manager, heavy with correction and light with apology. Notice of violation for unscheduled test mode, required training for staff, immediate remediation plan. The second was from Mr. Clement's office. Claim denied pending further review. Indicators of pre-loss activity. Cooperation requested. The third was from Doyle. A PDF of his report so dry it could have started a fire if you stacked it too close to a radiator. The report used phrases that did not sound like a life. Pre-incident manipulation, unauthorized alteration of system state, non-conforming access to riser isolation hardware. It was beautiful. It was a hymn with no chorus. It made no mention of soup, or marriage, or the sound a lighter makes when it fails to be a sound and becomes a bloom. A detective called, not Doyle, a man with an economy of syllables and the suspicion that all humans are capable of all things. He asked if I would like a protective order. I asked if I needed one. He asked if I wanted one. There's a difference that matters. And I realized I was allowed to decide for once what kind of sentence I wanted my name to sit in. "I will not be in this apartment long enough to require one," I said, "but I would like the record to say that the building is not to be used as a prop." He grunted, which is cop for amen. I rented a small place 4 subway stops away, with a window that admitted light the way a guarded friend admits secrets. On my first night there, I slept through until a trash truck became a sermon at 4. I wrote Mrs. Park a note and taped it to the lobby board. "If you hear anything that sounds like a building clearing its throat, call me. If you smell soup, come up." Mara texted one line, "I'm sorry for the instrument." She is not a writer, but the sentence worked. I responded with one line, "I am sorry for the loneliness." Neither of us lied, neither of us retreated. 2 weeks later, I got an email from Doyle with a photograph taken down in the pump room. New lockout tags, a fresh shroud, a laminated sign that said, "No test without work order," in a font that believes in its own masculinity. He wrote, "They did a thing. You did a thing." Then, as a postscript, "Go talk to Hansen anyway. Your head deserves a witness who knows your childhood from your hinges." So I did. Hansen turned out to be a man who waters his plants with the seriousness of a surgeon. He didn't ask me why I was there. He asked me what problem I solve in the world. I said I listen to water. He said he listens to people pretend not to be water. We got along.
15. Water, time, doors. I went back to the building on a Sunday when the radiator whistled like a bird with a habit. I pressed my badge to the glass just to hear the satisfied sigh of access. I held my palm on the panel cabinet where a week ago I'd held my rage. The metal was room temperature again. That is its job. Mrs. Park waylaid me in the hall with a container that could have housed a small animal. "Seaweed soup," she said, "for stamina and new beginnings." She looked me over as if she were checking a detector for its indicator. "You look like a man with fewer ghosts." "Fewer," I said, "or better at naming them." She patted my hand. "Names are leashes," she said. "Sometimes you put one on, and sometimes you take one off." We sat on the bench by the mailboxes and watched the building do what buildings do: swallow packages, exhale neighbors, hold secrets in places no camera cares to go. "I want to write something for the lobby," I said to her. "Not a manifesto, a card, a simple thing about how to read the panel when the panel insists it is only for professionals." "People like simple," she said. "People pretend they like drama. They like instructions." So I wrote a card and taped it beneath the fire evacuation map where nobody looks until it is too late. It read, "If the panel says test and nobody warned you, it is not your job to panic. It is your job to ask. The building is a story. Make it tell you in order. Time, what changed and when. Water, did it move and how. Doors, who touched them and why. If you do nothing else, write down the minutes. The minutes will defend you." I stood back and felt foolish, and then felt less foolish, because Mrs. Park nodding is legally binding in 3 jurisdictions of the heart. "You will marry again," she said, as if predicting weather, "to someone who tells the truth in their first draft." "I may marry no one," I said, "and remember to water my plants." "Plants do not check you into test. They only ask for light." On my way out, I pressed my palm against the apartment door out of habit. Inside, I heard the faintest of sounds, the happy exhale of a refrigerator, the song of a sink drip that means, "Call a plumber" or "Forgive yourself." I didn't go in. I walked down the hall to the elevator, the same hall where a lighter once tried to become a sentence, and rode down while the camera watched me be exactly what I said I was: a man on an errand, a witness to his life, a person not in rehearsal. On the street, a child pulled at a hydrant cap with the haphazard certainty of youth, and his father laughed and said, "Leave the water where it belongs." The child obeyed. The father lifted him. The city did not burn. Later, in my new kitchen, I set a kettle on and texted Doyle a photograph of steam and a clock. "Proof equals pattern," I wrote, and he sent back a napkin with "Amen" drawn in block letters. I poured my tea and listened to the building I lived in now, a quieter throat, different pipes, a different alphabet of clicks. I thought about Mara and the part of her that wanted the universe to pronounce her right in public. I thought about the part of me that wanted to be the only person who knew how to keep the machinery from misunderstanding the weather.
I opened the window and let the room change its mind about itself. Air is the best evidence. It writes nothing down and remembers everything. It carried my steam past the indicator light on the lock and into a world that would continue to perform its minor miracles without my supervision. When I slept because I had written the night in a row, and the row had become a story the building recognized. When I awoke to the absence of rehearsal. In the morning, nothing cleared its throat. The silence had edges. I kept them.